Now, as you know, a presidential commission investigated this. And they did say that the O-rings had frozen, and that was why Challenger blew up, but they didn't say a lot of other things. And I continued my personal investigation for 4 more years while I was working for the Treasury Department, and I was able to determine that the reason that NASA launched when they shouldn't have was because of the television publicity connected with the Teacher in Space mission, and of course the Teacher in Space was Krista McAuliffe. She was one of the 7 astronauts who died that day. And it was done on the orders of the Reagan White House because they wanted that thing to get up in time for the President's State of the Union address that night. And that was something that people like Senator Ernest Hollings knew, but that the Rogers Commission and the White House Public Affairs apparatus never told us about. I was also able to show that NASA had kept flying the shuttle despite their knowledge that the O-ring joints were flawed for one very specific reason, and that is so as not to interfere with military launches the shuttle was going to be making in support of President Reagan's Star Wars weapons in space program. Engineers objected to continuing to fly, and this is why they were told they were going to fly anyway. And the Star Wars program, of course, was the beginning of a long-range plan called Full Spectrum Dominance that we're now seeing a resurgence of under the Bush administration. Now, I tell you this story not only because it's my own experience, but because it's a concrete example of what happens when a nation goes from being a democracy to an empire. Some very definite things take place, and one of these things is that human life no longer matters. They don't care if people live or die. They will kill millions, whole nations, entire cultures to get what they want, and they will give it fancy names, like the War on Terror. And they'll tell you that the Earth is overpopulated, so millions more must die, perhaps starve to death, which appears to be starting to happen even as we speak today. Now, another manifestation of an empire is there is always a great leader whose image and prestige matters more than common sense and the truth. There's a great communicator. There's a decider. There's a unitary executive. And that leader is going to be very good at scaring you. And of course, if you read 1984, and I taught 1984 when I was a high school teacher, scared the dickens out of me and everybody else in the class. But that's the way it works. And we see that this is how it works today. And these people will make you act out of fear and agree to things or let things go on that you would never agree to if you really sat down and thought about it or even talked to somebody else about it. And there's just one thing on the great communicator decider syndrome that I forgot to mention earlier about my experience at Yale. One of my classmates in the freshman class that went into Yale in 1964 was George W. Bush. Oh. Another thing that happens when we become an empire is that ideas of science and knowledge, and if we want to, we can call that truth, because anyone who does science, tries to take truth as a standard, are all sacrificed to the imperatives of militarism and national security. And that's what happened to the Space Shuttle program, to NASA, and that's what's happening today, because no nation in history has been so proficient at inventing things to kill other human beings. Now, let me just fast forward very quickly here. I don't want to take up any more time. On April 16, 2007, a little over a year ago, I was on a train platform in Maryland. I got a call from my ex-wife saying our son Fred was all right. I was very shocked at hearing this. Fred was an engineering student at Virginia Tech. Later in the day, I talked to Fred. He had been in a classroom in Norris Hall when it was attacked by the deranged student who killed 32 people that day and then himself. Fred was one of the students who jumped from a second-story window while the professor blocked the door so they could escape. Professor of rescue was shot and killed that day, and my son escaped with a broken ankle. We were lucky, and my heart, of course, goes out to the parents of all the other kids and the faculty members who died that day. But I felt that that violence at Virginia Tech that my son went through was the same manifestation of a violent and deranged culture that I had witnessed in my youth, the Kennedy assassination, that I witnessed again at the Challenger disaster, and that all of us are witnessing today with the ongoing military conquest of the Middle East and what may be the start of deliberate global mass starvation. And so the question that I would leave you with today, myself, is when will it all stop?